Subcommittee of Livestock and Foreign Agriculture will now come to order. We are doing a hybrid subcommittee meeting this morning, which is not unusual these days. We're unfortunately still not out of the woods of this horrific COVID pandemic that has impacted every fabric and region of American lives, over 900,000 lost and around the world. So we hope that we're going to pass some additional funding to protect American people, but that's not the subject of this morning's hearing. The subject of this morning's hearing is a review of the Farm Bill as we set the table for next year's reauthorization, focusing today on international trade and food assistance programs. And it could not be more timely for a number of reasons. But the fact is, the efforts to ensure that America agriculture, which it has traditionally done, provides the sort of support not only to feed all of our people, but to also help in places of the world where there is hunger and food insecurity has been a tradition of previous farm bills. So we're going to look at that. The subcommittee will receive testimony from the witnesses today. We have two panels of very good witnesses. And with consultation of the ranking member, pursuant to Rule 11E, I want to make members of the subcommittee aware that other members of the full committee may join us today. They're always welcomed, and we appreciate their participation. With that said, I will begin with my opening statement. And I want to thank Ranking Member Johnson and members of the subcommittee and those that are participating on Zoom for your focus on international food assistance and trade programs within the Farm Bill. These programs are important for multiple reasons. They open and grow new markets for high-quality American food and agriculture. They save lives. They build local agriculture and food systems in developing economies, and they strengthen our foreign relations to advance shared values as the oldest democracy in the world and still a beacon of light. These shared values that we have that begin with human rights and the democratic institution that protects those human rights, our freedoms that we hold most dearly. I think all of you know, I like to say as a third-generation farmer, still my primary source of income, that food that we grow in America is a national security issue. We don't always look at it that way, but I think maybe at the beginning of the pandemic with the closure of restaurants and schools, people began to realize and seeing some scarcities and grocery shelves that in fact we can't take it for granted, that the hardworking American farmers, ranchers, dairymen and women, the farm workers every day do so much with less than 4% of the nation's population to put that food on America's dinner table every night. Let us never, ever take it for granted. And not only can we feed America with the highest quality of products, the most nutritionist products, and we every day we work hard to make it better, at the most cost-effective level, although we know this inflationary spiral we're in right now is impacting the cost of those groceries. The fact is nobody, as that song goes, does it better than the American farmer, and as stewards of our environment as well. Obviously, I'm very passionate about that from my own experience. But the fact is we got problems. I wanted to send a copy of a story that I thought was very good. I bring it to your attention, and I would urge you to look at it. The title this morning is Russia's War in Ukraine. We see the storm coming, and the U.S. struggles to contain a deepening global food crisis. And that's in part why we want to have this subcommittee hearing here this morning. Putin's war in the Ukraine has been horrific, and I think we all have our very personal feelings about what we've seen and the courageous Ukrainian people fighting for their independence and their sovereignty. He is a pariah, and I think he's a war criminal. But the fact is that the devastation that he is playing upon the people of Ukraine is a wake-up call for all of us, I think. And I think he's, in a strange sort of way, has brought us together. We needed to be together before this, but I think we'll see continuing themes from the testimony of our witnesses and the questions that we ask about what this means. We've already seen the disruption of global grain and fertilizer markets. We've seen a significant downstream effect on countries reliant on Black Sea trade. And for this reason, I've signed on to a letter with many of my agricultural colleagues requesting that the USDA and the USA use resources available in Bill Emerson's Humanitarian Trust to help address food insecurity. The Trust is one of many vital farm programs that we look forward to hearing about today from our witnesses. But I believe that, and I've had conversations, I suspect many of my colleagues have, with Secretary of Agriculture and folks in the USDA, that we're going to have to look at other resources with the Commodity Credit Conservation Program and others to provide funding to optimize American farmers and ranchers to use their land and resources that allows for surplus production in various commodities, especially in our grain and wheat areas that many countries don't have. Through the international food assistance programs, only make up a fraction of the percent of our federal budget. Americans still lead global donations and share a bounty through the Farm Bill programs like Food for Peace, the McGovern-Dole, and Food for Progress. And so I think a concomitant view, I believe, that we share is a moral obligation to provide leading nations to provide assistance to countries in need. And there are certainly many people who need our help. According to the USDA's International Food Security Assessment from last summer, before the invasion of Ukraine, a number of food insecure people in 2021 was estimated to be at 1.2 billion people. 1.2 billion people. There's 7 billion people plus on the planet. So think about that. That's almost 20%. And that increase was due to a lot of factors, including COVID-19 and climate-related disasters and conflict. And the conflict, of course, is bearing on us now. The past 2 years have made it clear that our global integrated food system has some cracks. And I want to hear ideas from our two panels and from members of the committee on how we can deal with some of those cracks. The vulnerabilities as climate change continues to impact our production systems. Exchanging technical knowledge with partnering countries, such as the Farmer to Farmer program, the Berlong-Cochrane fellowships, I think can be helpful in food insecure nations, make them more food efficient. But food is just one assistance that agriculture connects us globally. And I think the Farm Bill trade promotion programs are something else that we need to think about in terms of next year's farm reauthorization. Market access program has had a tremendous benefit in every region of the country. I know it has in California. We are very strong advocates of the market assistance program. Foreign market development programs, FMD, is also helpful for U.S. producers to develop commercial relationships and facilitate agricultural trade. In addition, we're going to have to deal with the supply chain issue. I mean, it's still a problem. And these empty containers are not good. We've got two bipartisan pieces of legislation that many of us are supporting. Congressman Garamendi's got that piece of legislation. We hope to get it worked out here that will deal with the demurrage issue and the delay issues on the empty containers. And I've got legislation on antitrust provisions. So it's kind of an all-of-above approach. These programs work when they work, and to the degree we make them work more efficiently, they contribute to local growth and to agricultural support. Maintaining and deepening relationships is a vital part of engendering economic development and shared values and building future markets for American agriculture. So the two objectives that are advanced by the Farm Bill's Title III programs are not mutually exclusive in my mind. I think they're complementary. And I'd like to hear our witnesses give their thoughts on that. So we look forward from hearing them on the full spectrum of Title III programs and delivering on their mission. The witnesses on our two panels have impressive amount of knowledge on how the Title III farm programs impact their efforts in the world. I am excited to hear from them, and I know we'll have a productive discussion about what's working and what's not working so well and how we can improve it. So before the introduction of the witness, I'd like to introduce my friend and the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from South Dakota, Mr. Johnson, for any remarks he'd like to make.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd start by associating myself with so much of what you said, sir. I think as I watched the development of the 2018 Farm Bill from afar, it was clear to me how focused people on both sides of the aisle were on these putting together the right Title III approach. And I think we all understand the value proposition, right? Clearly, it's needed for communities in need. Clearly, it can be helpful to producers, providing them an avenue for their hard-earned yields. But also, I think, sir, you're right. When you talk about shared values, clearly these Title III programs can help to advance shared values. And Title III is not perfect, and I think as we understand amid a pandemic, ongoing conflict, and weather-related disasters, it's good for us to have hearings like this so that we can look forward to what does Title III need to look like, not just today, but in the next Farm Bill as well. As we talked, sir, before the hearing, you had noted that Politico article, and I too thought it was prescient. I thought it was on target for today. We see the storm coming. We see the storm coming, and we know that the war in Ukraine is adding shocks to an already fragile supply chain and is exacerbating inflationary pressure. I think we do see a storm coming. I think we see a global food crisis that could be every bit as dangerous as those we saw in 2007 and 2008. And I think we're looking forward to hearing from our witnesses about are there things that we can do to be more resilient, to be more prepared, to try to shave off the most jagged edges of that storm that we see coming. And of course, I'm pleased to hear USAID will trigger the Bill Emerson Humanitarian Trust. And I have concerns, I know a number of my colleagues do, about how long it takes those commodities to enter the pipeline. And so can the communities in crisis, can they wait until the fall? And hopefully Ms. Charles can educate us more on what that pipeline would look like and when that relief can actually be delivered. And before I close, I wouldn't feel right if I don't mention again how important it is for this administration to prioritize trade, our trading programs, trading relationships, and as the chairman mentioned, trade promotion programs. And one thing we need to do, our country, is make sure we get swift nominations of a chief ag negotiator and, of course, also an USDA undersecretary for trade and foreign agriculture. Both of those positions are needed. They're uniquely positioned to be able to help in this whole suite of conversations we're going to be having today. And frankly, it's hard to imagine a healthy American agricultural sector without new markets, expanded markets, stable markets, and clearly those positions will help with that. So with that, I welcome our witnesses. I'm excited about it too. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Well, I thank the gentleman for his statement and good words. I concur. Chairman Scott wanted to be here, but is not able to, and I appreciate all the good work he does in providing leadership for our committee. And as common courtesy, we want to provide the ranking member an opportunity to weigh in as well for any opening statement he might like to make.
Sure. Chairman Costa, Ranking Member Johnson, thank you so much for this subcommittee hearing and for your leadership. Much appreciated. Thanks. Thank you to our witnesses here. I got a chance to talk with each of you briefly here, those serving the first panel. Thank you for your leadership. The times that we're in are difficult times. and I think only going to get worse here, unfortunately, as we reach into the fall. But good morning, everybody, and my thanks to our witnesses for spending time with us this morning. This is a timely conversation. I look forward to learning from you and thinking more comprehensively about how we can best move forward. We are at a crossroads. The geopolitical strife, weather-related disasters, pandemic-related impacts, and supply chain and inflationary crisis are wreaking havoc on the world, and especially affecting those in vulnerable countries and communities. And there are so many simultaneous emergencies at the moment. So I do want to take this opportunity to extend my appreciation to USDA and USAID and all their partners for their tireless work to feed our world's hungry. You're truly doing God's work, and we thank you for that. And please pass that thanks along to your colleagues that work with you. However, there's much more to do, and that's why this hearing is so important. A review of Title III will allow us to learn what's working, what's not, what isn't, and to provide direction as we head into deliberation of the 2023 Farm Bill. And this conversation will also be informed by the crisis in Ukraine. As almost everybody knows, Ukraine is a large producer of grain, and together Russia and Ukraine supply 26% of global wheat exports, and Ukraine supplies 13% of the world's corn. Ukraine is also the largest global supplier of sunflower oil. Russia is a major global supplier of fertilizer ingredients and oil and gas products. I think we have been meeting with some of the best thought leaders, trying to really map what we will see occur here into the fall. Looking forward to hearing your analysis and assessment of this, but everything we've heard and really leads to a pretty grim conclusion that by this fall, we're going to see significant increase in hunger, starvation, and death by famine. And with that, a destabilization that's going to result in violence and probably an increase in terrorism. When you think about the Middle East gets almost half its food from the Ukraine, and these farmers are now on the front lines defending their nation, and the lack of supply of diesel fuel. We don't know if that winter wheat's going to get harvested, and we certainly don't anticipate if this continues, where the spring planting will occur. So as a result of the disruption to exports, global commodity markets have spiked and will continue to experience volatility, and this volatility leads to higher commodity prices, but there remain very real concerns over fertilizer and pesticide availability and their skyrocketing costs. So I echo my colleagues in hoping this hearing reveals more immediate solutions to these problems. Anything, obviously, I believe that we can do to provide tools to American farmers that they can increase their production at this point in time, which is challenging with inflation costs and availability of fertilizer and those things. But anything that we could do and that the president can do, and I think there's some things that he could do immediately to help increase that production by American farmers of just additional bushels. Because I believe with every additional bushel above and beyond what we normally would produce is lives saved somewhere around the world at this point in time. I also hope USDA and USAID can shed some light on any near-term executive actions this administration is aiming to take, including the drawdown of the Bill Hermerson Humanitarian Trust. And with that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, thank you so much. Now you're back.
I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania, and let me just underline a number of the comments you made. I really believe that we are, as you noted, in a seminal moment in world history. You can look back at the 20th century, and you can look at World War I and the Spanish flu. You can look at the Depression, World War II, Vietnam War, and Civil Rights Movement. But clearly, this time period that we're living in today, the last 4 years, the next 4 years, historians will look back 25 years from now, and they'll make determinations. Did we make more good decisions than poor decisions? We're going to make both. Hopefully, we'll make more good decisions. And therein lies our challenge. So the chair would request that other members who wish to submit their opening statements for the record will do so and will be accepted. And let us begin with our witnesses and their testimony to ensure that we have an ample time for questions. I'm pleased to welcome two distinguished panels of our witness for our hearing today. Our witnesses bring to our hearing a wide range of experience and expertise, and we want to thank you for joining us. Our first witness on our first panel today is Mr. Daniel Whitley, who serves as the Administrator of Foreign Agricultural Services at the United States Department of Agriculture. And we thank you for taking the time this morning. I think you understand, as all the witnesses do here, the regular order. We have the 5 minutes, although your testimony, I think, is much more detailed, and we appreciate that. And you've got the green light, and then you get the yellow light, and then the red light. Nothing bad will happen, but we'd like you to conclude. So, Mr. Whitley, thank you here. Please begin your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the committee. I am pleased to appear before you today with my colleague from the U.S. Agency for International Development, Sarah Charles. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the trade, market development, international food assistance, and capacity building programs and activities administered by USDA as authorized by the Farm Bill. As Administrator of the Foreign Agricultural Service, I want to thank the subcommittee for your continued support for the work of the agency and the department. As the Farm Bill process moves ahead, I look forward to working with you and offer the assistance of our staff and to help and support your efforts. Our prayers are with the Ukrainian people as they deal with this unprovoked and unjustified attack, and we stand with the people of Ukraine during this tragic moment. Recently, Secretary Vilsack implored farmers to never take freedom for granted and highlighted the key role of farmers and ranchers in helping America prosper. Never have those words rung more true than today. FAS is USDA's lead international agency linking U.S. agriculture to the world to enhance export opportunities and global food security. FAS supports producers with a network of agricultural economists, marketing experts, negotiators, and trade specialists in Washington, D.C., and nearly 100 international offices covering 180 countries. We are proud that our role in opening and maintaining markets has resulted in billions of dollars of additional U.S. agricultural exports for the benefit of American producers, and that the international food assistance programs and capacity building activities administered by the FAS provide assistance that has helped millions of people worldwide. In addition to our Farm Bill authorized programs, FAS also expands and maintains access to foreign markets for U.S. agricultural products by removing trade barriers, helping to enforce U.S. rights under existing trade agreements, and negotiating new agreements that benefit agriculture. FAS works with foreign governments, international organizations, and the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative to establish international standards and rules to improve accountability and predictability for agricultural trade. We will continue to focus on maintaining and expanding access for U.S. agricultural exports through rebuilding trust with our partners and holding them accountable. Exports of U.S. farm and food products to the world totaled $177 billion in 2021, topping the 2020 total by 18% and shattering the record set in 2014 by 14.5%. For many agricultural products, foreign markets now represent more than half of total sales. U.S. ag exports support more than 1 million jobs here at home and contribute more than $154 billion in additional economic activity. To continue these impressive gains, we cannot rest. We must not rest. We must continue to refine and improve our long-standing Farm Bill authorized programs to ensure that they operate efficiently, effectively, equitably, and sustainably. Our numerous farm bills, Congress authorized and refined an effective combination of ag market development and export credit guarantee programs. These programs are designed to develop markets, facilitate financing of overseas sales, and resolve market access barriers, all of which are goals central to the FAS mission. FAS partners with more than 70 cooperative groups representing a cross-section of the U.S. food and agricultural industry and manages a toolkit of Farm Bill authorized trade promotion programs to help U.S. exporters develop and maintain markets for all of our products. Included under the umbrella of the Farm Bill programs are the MAP program, the TASK program, the EMP program, along with several others. A newly independent study prepared by some of our independent research organizations concluded the effectiveness and the benefits of these programs. The largest market development program operated by FAS is the Market Access Program. Through MAP, FAS partners with nonprofit U.S. agricultural trade organizations, U.S. agricultural cooperatives, nonprofit state regional trade groups, and state agencies to share the cost of overseas marketing activities, such as consumer promotion, market research, and trade show participation. The 2018 Farm Bill makes available $200 million of CCC funds annually for MAP. Funding levels for MAP have showed the impressive gains that can be made for U.S. agriculture by using these programs. As I conclude, as administrator of USDA's Foreign Agricultural Service, I am proud of our efforts to improve foreign market access for U.S. products, build new markets, improve the competitive position of U.S. ag in the global marketplace, and provide food aid and technical assistance to foreign countries. We have the opportunity to refine our programs when reauthorizing the Farm Bill trade title so that they make U.S. foreign policy more efficient, effective, equitably, and sustainably, while providing greater export opportunities to a vast range of markets for the benefit of U.S. farmers, ranchers, and other stakeholders. This concludes my statement. I look forward to answering any questions you may have and working with you to reauthorize Farm Bill programs that will facilitate U.S. agricultural exports and maintain our commitment to providing technical and food assistance to those around the world in need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Administrator Whitley, for those good words in your testimony, and make sure to put in some good points to the Secretary on your behalf.
Thank you.
Our next witness on the panel is Sarah Charles. Sarah Charles serves as the Assistant to the Administrator in the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance in the United States Agency of International Development. And it directly, relates to the comments that we've already heard this morning by a number of us as to the potential challenges that we're facing this year, and I believe into next year, as it relates to the potential humanitarian crisis for food that many of us fear is going to only heighten as a result of the factors we're dealing with. Ms. Charles, please open on your testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Costa, Ranking Member Johnson, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the U.S. Agency for International Development's food assistance programs, and thank you to Administrator Whitley for being with me here today. Most importantly, thank you for your collective commitment to help alleviate hunger and improve food security throughout the world. Your support has helped us reach the most vulnerable in times of need and helped communities around the world build resilience in the face of multiple shocks. And as you've both alluded to, it's also a strong demonstration of U.S. leadership and shared values throughout the world. USAID's food assistance programs are more important than ever. Global food insecurity levels continue to break records due to the confluence of conflict, climate impacts, and the economic impacts of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. At the beginning of 2022, the United Nations estimated there were 274 million people in need of assistance, a 60% increase over 2020. And this was before Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. Russia's invasion has caused intense suffering and displacement in Ukraine and in the region, and it is already impacting food security around the world. As a result of the war, we could face another 10 to 20% rise in commodity prices due to supply chain disruptions and export restrictions. In the Yemeni city of Aden, the price of a piece of bread increased by 62% in less than 1 week after the start of the war. In Lebanon, domestic food price inflation has now climbed to a record 483%. We are extremely grateful to Congress for the generous funding provided to USAID through the Omnibus, including the supplemental funding to address rising needs caused by Russia's war. We are already using those funds to provide relief to those both inside and outside of Ukraine impacted by the war. And in response to the rising global food insecurity, exacerbated by the war and Ukraine's impact on global food supplies, USAID and USDA are in very active dialogue to determine the specifics that would go into drawing down funding from the Bill Emerson Humanitarian Trust. We are considering all factors, including commodities and countries that could benefit from these U.S. food commodities, with the intent to bolster existing emergency food operations in countries acutely impacted by this crisis. I am also pleased to announce today that USAID is providing an additional $114 million to the people of Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia, who are grappling with the worst drought the region has seen in 4 decades. The funding will be used to provide food and specialized nutrition assistance for malnourished children and mothers, medical supplies, and clean water to those in need. Unfortunately, the reality is that while the number of people in need is growing, the number of people we can reach with the same amount of funding is decreasing. Rising transportation and food prices have cut USAID's purchasing power. Even prior to Russia's war in Ukraine, our purchasing power for food commodities had already dropped 11.4% in just 1 year. This equates to feeding 10 million fewer people in the coming year with the same amount of funding. We must look for efficiencies to help save as many lives as possible. Given the scale of global food insecurity and the dynamic nature of its causes, it's imperative that we're able to fully optimize our programs to be able to employ best approaches for each context in the future. The reauthorization of the Farm Bill at this time of global crisis provides a critical opportunity for Congress to ensure that the U.S. government has the most effective tools at its disposal to meet the humanitarian challenges of the day. Technical fixes in the 2018 Farm Bill, like the elimination of monetization requirements, allowing community development funds to count towards the $365 million annual non-emergency floor, and adjusting cost categories to provide more flexibility have had a positive impact on USAID's food assistance program over the last 4 years. But more could be done to ensure that Title II assistance remains fit for purpose in the face of global food insecurity and increased costs. To help keep this program viable in the years ahead, there are 3 technical fixes that could be pursued as part of the 2023 Farm Bill. First would be increasing the cap on 202E resources to provide USAID with the flexibility to support both increasingly expensive emergency logistics and quality non-emergency program design at the same time. Second, we could expand the Food for Peace Act to allow IDA and Title II funding in the same award to cut down on paperwork and improve efficiency of taxpayer dollars. And third, we could establish a single associated cost category to eliminate some of the barriers to entry for new, small, or local organizations. U.S. leadership has never been more critical in the face of staggering levels of food insecurity. Optimizing our food assistance programs saves lives. We look forward to working with the committee ahead of the upcoming Farm Bill reauthorization to ensure we can effectively respond to crises, build resilience among communities, and ensure that taxpayer dollars alleviate hunger and improve food security around the world. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and I want to thank both witnesses this morning. We'll now recognize members of the committee, excuse me, for 5 minutes each, alternating between the majority and minority members of the committee, and I shall begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Charles, your testimony, you noted that, as we all stated, Ukraine and Russia account for nearly 30% of wheat exports and 18% of corn exports in the world. Obviously, it's a staggering number. As I spoke with Secretary Vilsack last week, we don't know how much seed is going to get in the ground as a result of this war. Have you begun to do an analysis on how we will work together in terms of the non-emergency food aid programs to build more resilience, but also the emergency aid food programs? I think we've got to deal with both.
So maybe I can start specifically by talking about efforts inside of Ukraine to ensure that even under these incredibly difficult conditions, they're able to export as much as possible. So our development programming in Ukraine is working very closely with the Ukrainian Ministry of Agriculture. Their estimates right now are that Ukraine may be able to plant for the spring season and yield something in the range of 50% of what a normal harvest might be from that spring crop. The challenge, of course, remains critical inputs to that, including diesel, as I think was alluded to before. The government of Poland has actually made the decision to draw down on their strategic reserve in order to supply the Ukrainians with diesel from Poland. And then the Ukrainians are working with ExxonMobil to backfill. But like you said, this has knock-on impacts around the world. So we're working through the Feed the Future program to look at ways to expand our efforts to increase yields worldwide, but also to look for greater efficiency in our emergency programs as well.
I had a meeting earlier this week with the French ambassador, and he indicates that his country, with his president and others, are leading a European effort to deal on this issue of hunger and humanitarian assistance. Are we working together with our friends with the European Union? Because it seems to me we're working together on a whole host of efforts as it relates to this crisis. And this seems to be one of those that I think we really need to be coordinating hand in glove.
We absolutely are. I actually just came back from Europe about 10 days ago, where I was meeting with European counterparts, both on the response in Ukraine, but more critically, or as critically, the global response to the food security crisis. Administrator Power actually chairs a weekly meeting with our European Union counterparts on the crisis in Ukraine, but the focus of these discussions in the last couple of weeks have been as much about response to the global impact of Ukraine's war on global food security as well. So the French, the European Union, the Germans, the United Kingdom, these are critical partners in our response.
No, they have to be, and obviously working together we can consolidate resources and do a better job in addressing it and avoid duplication and be more cost effective. We might want to suggest to have maybe Powers here to brief us on this. Mr. Whitley, I'm very concerned about how climate change is impacting global food systems and what role the Farm Bill programs have in improving uptake in sustainable practices with our partner countries. Do you care to comment?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that one of our programs, we can certainly prioritize and target countries that are interested and have shown a willingness to embrace climate-smart agriculture in the manner in which American agriculture views sustainability. Food for Progress is a program where we can highlight and emphasize and share our technology, our expertise, our innovation on global ag production in a sustainable manner. And we've, this year's priority country list, I think 3 countries that we think we can partner with and educate them on, and they can be partners in the international conversation on what does sustainable.
Well, I think we'd like to have more detail on that. I think many of us are watching what Europeans are doing with this farm to fork policy and wondering ultimately how that's going to work. But more to be learned about that. Let me close before my time runs out. I mentioned earlier in my statement about the supply chain issues, and I know the Europeans are having similar supply chain issues. What emergency procedures or efforts is the administration contemplating? I mean, if we're having empty containers going back on the West Coast up to 80%, that's a problem. And we're in a crisis, and you know, even if we can consolidate our commodities that we can use to ship for support, if we don't have the capacity to move those products, you know, this is different than some of the other support we're providing into Poland and Romania. When we're talking about food grains and other such, you need ships.
Absolutely, and the administration does have a supply chain task force. Secretary Vilsack is a member of that task force. And
with Precari,
yes.
Yeah, we've had conversations, but have you looked at how that pertains to this effort with this potential humanitarian food crisis?
Yes, absolutely. It certainly is a problem in terms of trying to get product around the world, but we are providing assistance and information. We're hearing from our stakeholders every day about the challenges they face with getting products to market. And the 2 pop-up ports we announced in Seattle and Oakland hopefully will relieve some of the bottlenecks at the port so we can get those cars loaded.
Well, let the Secretary know, my time's run out, but we're going to want more information on this container issue, because it not only is it depressing current markets of American exports. You know, California exports 44% of its agriculture.
Correct.
It's a real challenge. But now you add to this crisis, we need to look at what emergency procedures could be implemented. My time's really expired, and I'll defer to my colleague and good friend, the gentleman from South Dakota, Mr. Johnson.
It's good to be the king, right? You get an extra minute when you need it. It's great. Administrator Whitley, I'll start with you. Recently, in fact, yesterday, my colleagues and I sent a letter to Secretary Vilsack and Ambassador Tai about Canada's proposal for their tariff rate quotas on dairy products. And I'll just be very upfront. I thought Canada's proposal fell woefully short. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to share any of your thoughts on both their proposal and where do we go from here?
Yes, sir. And I think USDA agrees that Canada's proposal has fallen woefully short. I think the ruling by the dispute settlement panel under the USMCA was clear that more needs to be done, and Canada has not met what we think the ruling has indicated. We're in talks and conversations with USTR on a regular basis. This is a top priority for the Secretary and USDA, and we're working on both what we can do to continue our conversation with our Canadian counterparts, but also what are the tools at our disposal given the USMCA agreement.
Well, thank you for that, and I want to reiterate both to the administration and probably more importantly to Canada that I think a vast swath of bipartisan members here in the United States House believe that Canada is not living up to its commitments under USMCA, as you alluded to, sir, and that we certainly want to support bold efforts on behalf of the administration to close that gap, because I do think American dairy producers deserve a fair opportunity for market access. So thank you very much for that. Ms. Charles, you, in your testimony, noted the purchasing power of your budget has gone down. I think you said 11.4%, which is obviously substantial. The chairman had noted that John Garamendi and I have a bill, Ocean Shipping Reform Act, that would address some of the supply chain crunches. He noted that he and I have a bill that would address the antitrust exemptions that the foreign flagged ocean carriers have. That would help a little bit. But give us some sense, to what extent have food aid recipients been impacted by the supply chain crunch, by shipping delays generally?
So thank you for highlighting that. We certainly feel the impact of supply chain disruptions. That 11.4% was even before the war in Ukraine. So I think we can anticipate that our purchasing power, unfortunately, will go even lower. Just to give you some flavor, it now costs something in the range of $164 per metric ton to ship food overseas. So where we're really feeling this is in the cost to move food around the world, and we already see ration cuts in places like Yemen. I think David Beasley was up on the Hill, the leader of the World Food Program, sharing some of this a couple of weeks ago, where we've seen a country where 13 million people are dependent on food aid, 50% ration cuts, again, even before the impact of those.
So, Ms. Charles, I mean, clearly it is a budgetary problem. I mean, is it also a logistical problem? I mean, even if you've got the budget, are you able to get the food where it needs to go when it needs to get there?
So we have supply chain experts who work very hard with our partners to ensure that we can plan as far in advance as possible. But that planning does take 3-6 months in advance to get food where it needs to go in the face of these kinds of supply chain disruptions. It makes it particularly difficult to use U.S. sourced commodities for something like a sudden onset crisis. I mean, this really is most appropriate in contexts where we're facing more chronic hunger because of that lag time, in part because of that lag time.
And what about our international partners, other developed countries that have a tradition? I mean, almost nobody's got a tradition like we do of international food aid. But is their ability to respond to these pop-up crises also reduced, I would think?
So most of our peer donors provide cash as opposed to in-kind assistance. So our assistance really does complement those efforts in places where we have acute food insecurity and local markets can't support local procurements. That's one of the kind of niche roles that our assistance provides. But we certainly are seeing these supply chain disruptions everywhere that we work.
Yeah, well, and I would just close by putting an even finer point on what you note, and that is that the United States plays an almost unique role in international food security, while others are able to provide cash, and that's clearly needed and helpful. You know, we're the breadbasket of the world. We're growing, you know, and raising the kind of food and protein that people need during times of duress, and I just want to thank you for your efforts. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his focus and his questions. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, our good friend, Representative Sanford Bishop, who we're very fortunate not only does a terrific job on the policy committee, but also does a good job for us on appropriations, representing the jurisdiction on the appropriate funding measures that we'll have to do a lot of what we're trying to do here as we implement Title III and other related programs. The gentleman from Georgia, Sanford Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me thank our witnesses, Administrator Whitley and Ms. Charles, for appearing this morning. Let me ask you a couple of questions. The first has to do with the current situation in Ukraine. It's only compounded the global food crisis by intensifying the need for humanitarian assistance and by reducing global supplies of grain, cooking oil, energy, and fertilizer. To bolster the American response to these crises, 36 bipartisan members of the House Agriculture Committee, myself included, recently sent Administrator Powell and Secretary Vilsack a letter encouraging them to tap the Bill Emerson Humanitarian Trust to make additional commodity donations available. Is this something that your agency is considering? If so, can you share your current plans to obligate available food for peace funds, and what steps need to be taken to access the trust? Secondly, how are the Bill Emerson humanitarian funds replenished once they are drawn down, and how long will it take to replenish those funds?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. I can assure you that we are in very active conversations with the U.S. Department of Agriculture about determining the specifics about drawing down that Bill Emerson Humanitarian Trust, and we're in the process right now of looking at commodities and countries that could benefit from U.S. sourced food commodities. And again, in terms of replenishment, I do think the statute has a specific cap on how much is replenished each year. I believe it's 20 million each year. And we will be very eager to share with the committee as soon as those specifics have been decided between USDA and USAID about specific plans, including what that would mean in terms of replenishment.
Thank you. Next question. In past Farm Bill debates, there have been efforts to reform the Food for Peace to shift more resources away from commodity food aid to cash assistance. What do you believe is the appropriate balance of commodities and cash assistance in Food for Peace? What are the trade-offs of proposals to shift more resources into cash or vouchers? And are there other ways that we should consider adding flexibility into the program implementation?
Thank you again for that question. As I think Ranking Member Johnson mentioned, we do see a critical role for U.S.-sourced food commodities in our both our humanitarian assistance and our resilience-focused programs, particularly where local markets can't support the acute food needs of those that are most in need of assistance. We are seeking, in part because of what we talked about in terms of the reduced purchasing power of our Title II resources, greater flexibility in the 2023 Farm Bill, including, for example, when we look at some of our resilience programs, we may, in the first, second, third year of a program focused on increasing the resilience of local communities, want a bigger basket of U.S.-sourced food commodities. But over time, as we invest in agricultural inputs, smallhold farmer yields, want to transition to more cash and voucher assistance to support local markets and hopefully markets that will become import markets as well for U.S. farmers.
Thank you very much. I will yield back the balance of my time. I thank you very much.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yes, I will.
since you have a little more time. It dawned on me as the gentleman from Georgia was asking you, it just seems to me that we have some commodities in this country in which we have surpluses, and some of those surpluses are in part caused by the supply chain issue with regards to empty containers. Have you looked at whether or not there's, as that is a source of protein that can be used in terms of your program, focusing on possibly purchasing some of those commodities in which there are surpluses and product is sitting in, if not at ports, sitting in warehouses that could be shipped?
So we start from a place of looking in the areas where we're seeing acute food insecurity, looking at the specific needs of those community, what's appropriate for their local diet, what's familiar to those communities, and then we work very closely with colleagues at USDA to source the appropriate commodities in response to that. And often that does include certain protein sources.
Yeah, well, let me give you an example, and you can get back to us on this. But wheat shortages, as we noted with Ukraine, produces the flour to produce a lot of the bread products that certain diets in certain parts of the world. Almonds, you make almond flour, and that works as a good substitute and in terms of a protein substitute. So those are the kind of things I think we need to be looking at in terms of thinking out of the box. Our next member is the ranking member, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Congressman G.T. Thompson from the 15th Congressional District, Pennsylvania.
Hello, Chairman. Thank you. Once again, thank you to the witnesses and your written testimony. It's been very helpful. I just wanted to follow up on some things. Ms. Charles, your testimony mentions the benefits of the flexibilities provided in the 2018 Farm Bill. Thank you for those kind comments, remarks. Yet it seems USAID has continued to push to make Food for Peace program a really important program, a cash giveaway program with virtually no requirements for the use of U.S. grown food. And, do you worry that a couple things. Do you worry that a continued push in that direction will erode domestic support for this longstanding program? And quite frankly, I worry about the effectiveness of this pivot when the fact is it's really about having enough food commodities with what we're experiencing, what we see just over the horizon come this fall. I don't, seems to be the better push would be obviously to help our farmers increase yield and production so that we actually have food, because I'm not sure where that money is going to be used to purchase commodities given what's happening in Europe right now and will spread into the Middle East. Oh.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Thompson. I can assure you that the Food for Peace program, both as authorized and as implemented, at its core is using U.S.-sourced food commodities. We do at times, depending on the market conditions, particular needs and environment, have wraparounds in terms of cash and voucher assistance. So, for example, in a place like Somalia or like Yemen, we may be pairing U.S.-sourced wheat, lentils, soy or vegetable oil with cash and vouchers that allow people to purchase things like vegetables to supplement those U.S.-sourced commodities, or iodized salt, which is more appropriate to purchase on the local market.
Okay, thank you. Administrator Whitley, with the Agriculture Trade Promotion Program winding down over the next year and a half, how do you foresee promotion of American agricultural products abroad being impacted?
Thank you, Congressman. And we do have the MAP program, which is the Farm Bill authorized program to promote U.S. agricultural products. And we've seen tremendous success. Obviously, we set a record amount of exports in 2021 at $177.5 billion. And many of our cooperators and companies tout the fact that they've been able to use MAP and FMD and some of these other programs to reach those successes. So as Congress authorizes these programs, we're certainly capable of implementing them and benefiting American agriculture to achieve exports. And as we get these authorizations and the requests from the Farm Bill, we will implement them to the best of our abilities.
Well, and thank you for that. Obviously, I'm a big fan of both agencies, and you know, the MAP program and FMD, those two tools that we provide through the Farm Bill are extremely important for our farmers, right, and our ranchers to be able to kind of navigate what can be pretty confusing and challenging in terms of trade. And so, look forward to working with you to make sure that all the tools are there as we prepare for the next Farm Bill to continue to be effective. We've one of the many lessons of this terrible genocide in Ukraine is looking at how vulnerable food security can be. Right. And so, and this is a win-win because economically it's a great market for our farmers and ranchers. I know in the Great Recession in 2009, when many industries were just struggling desperately, the agriculture industry held its own. We were resilient, but that was because of our trade that we have. So we can never forget that it's important. It serves the needs of people around the globe, but quite frankly, economically, it helps those hardworking folks that work so hard every day. My time is just about expired, so I will yield back.
Well, we thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania always for your contributions, and we'll continue to work together on all of the above. Our next member who is on cue is Representative Scott Desjardins from the wonderful state of Tennessee, the 4th Congressional District. Mr. Desjardins.
Oh, thank you, Chairman Costa, and thanks to our panelists today for being here. Ms. Charles, I'll start with you. USAID has historically pushed members of this committee to advocate for more flexibility to use cash to procure foreign commodities over in-kind donations of U.S. commodities. For example, instead of buying U.S. rice or U.S. wheat, USAID and its implementing partners could theoretically use U.S. taxpayer dollars to buy Russian wheat or Vietnamese rice to support feeding and development projects. Do you know, does USAID have controls in place to prevent U.S. dollars from supporting Russian businesses or others that directly compete with U.S. farmers?
So all of our U.S. foreign assistance programs certainly have controls in place to make sure that our assistance is used consistent with the law and consistent with, certainly right now our partners are looking very closely at new sanctions that have been imposed. We do not restrict our partners though from procuring with our international disaster assistance, with our IDA funding, from procuring on the local market what is on the local market.
Okay. Administrator Whitley, Ranking Member Thompson touched a little bit on this, but when you talk about the MAP or FMD funds, how are they awarded to cooperator groups? Is there a formula? And is it based on the domestic production value of the commodity?
No, the funds for MAP and FMD are awarded based off of export strategies called the Unified Export Strategy that they submit annually, and we have experts that assess these strategies for their capabilities to increase trade and increase exports. So we work with the cooperators and the companies who submit these strategies. We add a little of our own analysis to those strategies and have a conversation with the companies and determine the appropriate awards that we think those activities will lead to exports.
Okay, and do you have concerns with how current transportation costs may limit the reach of the Food for Progress program? And if so, has FAS been looking at creative ways to be more flexible with the $40 million transportation cap?
Yes, sir. We are limited by the cap, so we can only ship the amount of commodities that the $40 million will support in terms of transportation. So we look forward to working with Congress in this committee as we think about the next farm bill and what are some of the options and some ways that it could possibly be adjusted or more flexibility could be given so we could ship more commodities.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering either what could be done under emergency authority to lift the cap and what we could do to help if this is anticipation of this year.
We would welcome that conversation with Congress, Mr. Chairman, and certainly this is a limitation of the program, the $40 million.
We ought to look at that. Defer back to my colleague, and I'll give you the balance of the time I used of yours.
Okay. I guess we have time for one more question, Administrator Whitley. Food for Progress is an excellent long-term industrial development, market development program administered by USDA. However, I'm hearing concerns with the narrow scope of Food for Progress' most recent key priority areas and how they may preclude work on other worthwhile projects. Can you speak to how Food for Progress develops its priorities and how these priorities can be expanded and improved upon in advance of the fiscal year 2024 funding opportunity to allow more U.S. cooperators to participate?
Yes, sir. We work closely with USAID and other partners in carrying out a scoping mission on which countries and which parts of the world the program can be most effective. We evaluate those countries, those regions, those markets. We go through a process internal at USDA to determine where we think it's appropriate to go ahead and announce as priority countries. And once those countries are announced, we have a conversation with our implementing partners, and we ask them to submit proposals and think about those options. And those proposals come in, and again, we formulate an expert committee to evaluate those proposals and make those awards.
Okay. That about uses all my time. Thanks again to both of you for appearing today, and Chairman Costa, I yield back.
Well, I want to thank the gentleman, and the chair was more than willing to provide additional time for allowing me your willingness to yield, because I think this cap issue may be something we're going to have to look at. Thank you for your good questions and your comments. The next member that I think is in queue at this point in time is Representative Jim Baer from the 4th District in Indiana. Mr. Baer, I believe you're on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I really appreciate this opportunity to discuss international trade and food assistance, and I really appreciate the witnesses being here. My question goes to Administrator Whitley, and in your testimony, you stated that the Biden-Harris administration is working to better position our agricultural and rural communities to compete in the global economy. Your testimony goes on to say USDA is working every day to meet this challenge by creating more and better export market opportunities for farmers, ranchers, and producers. But some of my colleagues and I are concerned about the commitment this administration is making to prioritize trade, to craft an ambitious agenda, as well as swiftly nominate individuals to fill the position of chief agricultural negotiator and the Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs. So I really appreciate all the work that you do and the work that USDA FAS is doing. But I want to know what you're doing in this area of trying to fill these positions and enhance foreign trade.
Thank you, Congressman Baird. I know the administration is eager to complete the process to fill all of these positions that you mentioned. I will also add that we recently had our first in-person trade mission in the 2 years since the pandemic began. We took over 40 companies to Dubai on a trade mission and trade shows, and we received a very enthusiastic welcome from all of our trading partners and importers and distributors that we met in Dubai. Many of our companies walked away with enormous success moving forward. We had our first projections from that trade mission come out last year, and many of the companies in total reported that first-year sales will exceed $200 million. So we're excited to take along American agribusinesses to new companies and new markets, introduce them to importers and buyers, and continue the process of creating these market access opportunities. We have 4 more trade missions on tap later this year, and we're looking forward to additional successes.
So in that vein, the commodities that we are able to produce and incorporate into our trading programs, what are the comments for some of those on these trade missions, the recipients of our products, what, in your opinion?
Well, the biggest comments I think we heard in Dubai is that American agriculture is the most reliable in the world. We received a lot of feedback that many countries and many buyers want to strengthen their ties with American agriculture because of our ability to provide safe, nutritious, timely commodities and be reliable year in and year out. It's no accident that American agriculture set a record exports in 2021 despite the supply chain logistics, despite the COVID pandemic. It's because of the resilience of American agriculture to perform in all times. And I think that's being shown, given the situations around the world, that we are a reliable supplier, and many of our trading partners are looking forward to strengthening their relationship with us.
In that same vein, I'm going to switch a little bit. Do you have concerns about our current transportation costs and how that may limit the reach of our Food for Progress program? And if so, has FAS been looking to create ways to be more flexible with the $40 million transportation cap?
Yes, sir. We do have concerns about the $40 million cap, and we're certainly open to a conversation with Congress and the appropriate committees as they formulate the next farm bill to discuss what could be done or how it could be more helpful to have any flexibility with that cap to ship more products.
Thank you very much. I appreciate those remarks, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank the gentleman for his questions and his focus. I now believe that Representative Hayes wishes to be recognized. I believe Ms. Hayes is on Zoom. I don't see you, but...
I'm here.
Oh, terrific.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Glad to have you, and you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for hosting this very important hearing. During my time as the National Teacher of the Year, I traveled the world as an ambassador for education. And while I was abroad, I learned the degree to which many communities look to Americans to lead the way on food security. When I would visit towns, many students assumed I was there to bring food, as other Americans had done before me. Our international food programs are not just an exercise of goodwill. They are absolutely critical to communities that are impacted by the devastation of food insecurity. I'm thinking about now the crisis in Ukraine and what is happening as the world is watching many pregnant and nursing women flee their country. And I'm particularly concerned about the health and well-being of these women. Mr. Charles, how is USAID addressing the nutritional needs of pregnant and nursing mothers in Ukraine and their newborn babies?
Thank you. It's such a good question. This obviously has been a crisis that has even more so than normal disproportionately impacted women and children. We see this all over the world when war strikes. Women and children are most vulnerable, but we're seeing it in full force in Ukraine. And I actually think it's a good example to come back to Mr. Thompson's question about how our U.S.-sourced commodities combined with greater flexibility around cash can be helpful in addressing the acute needs of lactating women and children. The flexibility we're pursuing in terms of wraparound services for the U.S. commodities allows, for example, for us to use U.S.-sourced specialized food products to treat malnutrition, both in young children, but also pregnant and lactating women, but also have the cash to provide the kind of wraparound nutrition services, the training of community health workers, the assessment of nutrition, the follow-up services that are provided to ensure that those programs can be most effective and use our U.S.-sourced food commodities most effectively.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Additionally, the McGovern-Dole International Food for Education and Child Nutrition Programs is a critical international program which is aimed to provide at least one nutritious meal per day to vulnerable children in schools across the world. Mr. Whitley, how has the McGovern-Dole program been adapted to the COVID-19 pandemic? And do you have any recommendations for Congress to ensure the program can adequately respond to crises of this magnitude in the future? I can't hear in the room, I'm sorry.
Need to activate your mic there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Congresswoman. Yes, the McGovern-Dole program has continued to operate during the COVID pandemic, and we've seen enormous success. Coincidentally, this is the 20-year anniversary of the program, and since the program's inception, we fed over 31 million children around the world in 48 different countries, purchasing more than 1.3 million tons of American food. So it has been a huge success, the overall program. So every year we look forward to carrying out and implementing this program, identifying the places around the world where it can be most useful. And of course, as the Farm Bill authorizes this program, we're excited about the opportunities to continue it.
Thank you. I appreciate your commitment to this work and just the appreciation that we have to prioritize making sure that we get healthy meals to children, not just in our country, but all over the world. Mr. Chair, that's all I have. I yield back. Thank you.
We thank the gentlelady for her questioning, and the chair will now recognize the next member of the subcommittee, Representative Tracy Mann from Kansas 1st District.
Thank you, Chairman Costa and Ranking Member.
You're welcome.
Johnson, appreciate it. Today's hearing represents much of Kansas' legacy. I get to represent the big 1st District of Kansas, and former Senator Bob Dole used to be in this seat, and he paved the way, of course, for the McGovern-Dole International Food for Education and Child Nutrition Program, which, as you all know, helps fight hunger by providing nutritious meals to children in schools in developing countries. The Origins of Food for Peace program actually came out of the district as well at a County Farm Bureau meeting in southwest Kansas years ago. And so the list of reasons why international trade and food assistance programs like these are important to my district, important to Kansas, and that list goes on and on. Mr. Charles, first off, a question for you. Kansas is the wheat state. Wheat's the #1 commodity used in U.S. donations. If you add up all of the aid destinations, they would represent a top 10 market for U.S. wheat. In that same vein, the last 2 farm bills have granted USAID flexibility in implementing aid programs. However, more than half of that funding is from market-based assistance, meaning non-U.S. food. How can USAID prioritize in-kind donations of U.S. commodities like wheat?
Kansas certainly has a very proud legacy when it comes to food assistance overseas. I will say, as you noted, wheat is the biggest commodity that we source here in the United States. When we look at assistance, we really are looking at how to deliver the most effective assistance, and including how to make sure that that wheat is accompanied by the kind of wraparound services to ensure that it's actually addressing the most critical food security needs, that it's targeted at the most vulnerable, and that they're provided the kind of wraparound nutrition and health services that ensure that can be effective.
Great, thank you. And my next question is for you, Administrator Whitley. As you mentioned, the 2018 Farm Bill created International Agriculture Education Fellowship Program, or IAEFP. I applaud USDA's successful launch of IAEFP in Africa, but I'm concerned with USDA's recent decision to relocate IAEFP after only 1 year in a country. While I recognize the need for this type of program in many geographic regions, Such a move in the program's second year would undermine, or could undermine, the intent, sustainability, and overall success of the entire program. What do you need from Congress to ensure multi-year sustainability in a particular country so that we don't risk exiting a country prematurely before progress is made and accounted for?
Thank you, Congressman Mann. The recent decision to offer ag programming under IEPF to another country, we do think is within the legislative authority of how the program was written. The funding is available on an annual basis, and we award on an annual basis. However, the programs do have a 3-year component to it. So we will monitor and assess the program over a 3-year period for its overall effectiveness, but we can only allocate the money on that annual basis.
Great, thank you. I believe that IAEFP, to be successful, the department must find ways to extend its presence in awarded countries or regions. We can't expect to monitor any program with only a year's worth of results. I just think, once these programs are stood up, we've got to do it for a few years to really know if we're having results, and there has to be a sense of longevity and sustainability to see effectiveness and really effective use of tax dollars. So thank you both for being here and for what you do, and with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and we thank him for his questions and comments. The chair will now recognize the representative from Virginia's 7th District, my friend, the very able Representative Abigail Spanberger.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Johnson. Thank you for organizing this hearing, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I also serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, so I am very excited to have the opportunity to discuss the role of American agriculture abroad and the ways that we can both support our farmers and producers here domestically and also affirm our global leadership in assisting with humanitarian crises and economic development priorities across the world. So Administrator Whitley and Ms. Charles, thank you for being here today, and more importantly, thank you for the work that you do at USDA and USAID, respectively. As my colleagues have mentioned, certainly there is significant concern about what the Russian invasion will have in terms of impact on the global food supply, the potential for an increase in food insecurity and lower to middle income countries in particular, not to mention cost of food prices associated with rising costs of fertilizers, some of the kind of secondary and significant impacts of this invasion. We saw that just this week, the reporting is that farmers in Ukraine are expected to plant 8.6 million fewer acres compared to 2021. And in addition to challenges with planting, of course, we see the Russian invasion destroying agricultural equipment and other essential elements of production, harvest, and ultimately storage. So looking into the future, I'm curious, kind of in a broader scale, if you could speak to some of the role of USDA or USAID in helping Ukraine rebuild its agricultural capacity. And related to that, as we're looking at the 2023 Farm Bill, are there any additional flexibilities that we should be considering in this frame of how we assist countries that might need to not only feed their hungry citizens, but also rebuild their agricultural capacity? And I'll open it up to both of you.
Sure. Maybe I can take that question about Ukraine and their recovery. And I would just say we're not waiting for the end of the war to work with the government of Ukraine on resilience in their agriculture industry. Already, there's very close collaboration between existing USAID agricultural programs to help farmers with access to credit, to purchase seeds, fertilizer, and other core inputs. We really are working very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture in Ukraine to ensure that they're able to, even in the midst of the war, plant and hopefully export as much as possible, as well as supporting smallhold farmers on local production for the local market. I would also say we do think there are a couple of flexibilities that could be pursued as part of the Farm Bill to give us greater flexibility to respond to what we know is going to be acute food insecurity throughout the world as a result of this crisis, really for the next several years, we anticipate, including flexibility on the 202E cap to allow us to use a greater percentage of Title II funds to help build the capacity of local partners and provide wraparound services along with U.S.-sourced commodities, as well as, again, greater flexibility to co-program IDA funds and Title II funds for similar types of reasons.
One really quick follow-up question. Are you also engaging directly with our European Union partners as well?
Yes, I'm on the phone almost daily with my European Union partners. We're working very closely with them in the region as well. Administrator Power does a weekly sync with our European Union partners, including on the response inside of Ukraine, but also how to support Ukraine in exporting as much as possible, even under the circumstances, to address that global food security crisis, and coordinating on humanitarian efforts overseas. We're pressing on our European partners to not divert humanitarian resources from other parts of the world to Ukraine, but to seek new resources for that humanitarian response in Ukraine. And I think that'll be critically important next year, in particular, as we see the impacts of this food price spike.
I know we're low on time. Hopefully the chairman will be a little more generous.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Yes, so I think one of the things that USDA has provided early on to the crisis is an overall economic assessment and analysis of the situation. We have a economic reporting mandate from Congress, and we report out monthly through our World Ag Supply and Demand estimates the overall S&D situation: production, consumption, imports, exports, as well as stocks around the world. The next report comes out on April 8th, so we have a lot more information in this month's report than we had in the previous month's report. And we work with our Office of the Chief Economist, Seth Meyer, I know briefed several of your staffs a couple of weeks ago on the situation. So that is the official USDA estimates and projections of the overall global supply and demand situation. So we look forward to sharing that information publicly and with the world, because it certainly advises and gives insight as to how we see the overall situation and outlook of global commodities.
Fantastic. To both of our witnesses, thank you so much. And I really appreciate your time.
And we thank the gentlewoman from Virginia. And the chair will now recognize the Representative Barry Moore from the wonderful state of Alabama, 2nd Congressional District.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank all the witnesses for being in attendance today. Ms. Charles, this is a question I have. Can you explain why the International Disaster Assistance Account, which is being used to support those impacted in Ukraine, which we've been talking a good deal about today, but it generally precludes the use of U.S.-grown food? And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that and why. I can't hear.
Sorry. Our International Disaster Assistance Account has maximum flexibility, including the ability to source food in kind from the United States, if that's the most appropriate modality to respond in the context in which we're responding.
Okay, and so does that make sense to you? I know in situations where we try to support American agriculture, is it just a logistics issue most of the time with shipping cost, or could you maybe go in specifics of why you see that as we don't use the U.S. food as often as we should, maybe?
We start from a place of analyzing both the local needs and the local markets, and from that determine the most appropriate modality, which at times is U.S.-sourced in-kind commodities. Often that comes from the Title II account that we're discussing here today, but that could come from IDA-based assistance as well.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you for your time. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
All right, the gentleman yields back, and we thank him for his participation. And the chair will now recognize Representative Randy Finstra from the good state of Iowa, the 4th Congressional District.
Thank you, Chairman Costa, and thank you, Ranking Member Johnson. Administrator Whitley, in your testimony, you speak of how Biden and Harris administration is working to position our agriculture and rural communities to compete in the global economy. This morning, I was with our pork producers. I've also been talking with our soybean association and corn growers, and there's this passion, probably their number one issue, is trade, and especially advancing trade in the Pacific Rim, the second phase of the Chinese trade deal, and then MCA issues with the GMO corn in Mexico. And I know you've talked about this already. I was listening earlier on, and you noted that the administration has yet to fill the Undersecretary of Trade and Foreign Agriculture Affairs position, and the Chief Agriculture Negotiator has not been filled. I'm really concerned about this, and I want you to elaborate. Why are we a year and 3 months down the path, and these are critical to our agriculture community, and yet these things haven't been filled, and I just see a tremendous void here.
Thank you, Congressman Finster, for your question. So at USDA, we do have a White House liaison office who manages the political appointments for the department. So I would have to have the staff there get back to your staff on the particulars as why the positions haven't been filled, but we do have an office that manages that. Now, I know they're working very hard in trying to get those positions filled, but that is outside the normal responsibilities of FAS.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Minister. Can you just bring back my comments to them? Because these big organizations, I mean, for me, I'm number one in hog production in the country, in my district, and also close to the top in cattle, corn, soybeans, eggs, and they all need export markets. And so this is so critical. Another question. As you mentioned in your testimony, U.S. farmers export billions of dollars of corn products to Mexico each year. Unfortunately, Mexico is not taking non-science-based regulatory approach to agricultural products, including a December 2020 presidential decree promising to phase out all genetically modified corn imports by 2024. Already, we have seen Mexico government take steps to begin enforcing this decree. What steps is USDA currently taking to ensure that Mexico upholds these commitments that they made under the USMCA and ensure that U.S. farmers have access to the latest agricultural technology based on sound science? I saw yesterday the USDA's press release that noted Secretary's visit to Mexico, but unfortunately did not mention at all any progress on the corn biotech approvals. Can you broach that subject at all, or tell us where we're at?
Yes, no, I can assure you that the Secretary's visit to Mexico, which was yesterday, that he met with the Minister of Agriculture, Minister Villalobos, as well as the President of Mexico to make the case on the importance of following sound science and international standards for many of these inputs and products that we cultivate here in the United States of America. That's a high priority for Secretary Vilsack as well as the department, and we've made the case at all levels with Mexico that the direction they're headed is quite troublesome. We've heard from many industries here at home, and they too are extremely troubled by this, and this will continue to be a major focus and prioritization at USDA.
I'm glad to hear that. I mean, it is so important that we keep Mexico as a trading partner. And frankly, I look at it and say the USMCA has been agreed to, and there's parameters in there on how we move forward with this. So that's great to hear. One more thing, and I know you've talked about this again already, but we have a lot of vulnerable abilities in our country when it comes to drought, when it comes to flooding. Obviously, with the war going on, now we have these issues with fertilizer and drought-resistant seeds. So I'm just wondering, is anything that you can add to our farmers? I mean, we're ready to plant. My family in-laws are ready to plant. Is there anything that we can do in this upcoming season yet that's right around the corner to help out our farmers to get the seeds or to get fertilizer to where it needs to be, and then we can get it taken care of?
Yes, Congressman. Recently, USDA announced support for American farmers and offered up a program to encourage innovation, independent assessments, and to be resilient in terms of what we can do to produce fertilizer here at home. So hopefully that program spurs and generates some creative thought on behalf of American agriculture, and we can bring down those costs with resources right here at home.
Thank you. And just one little note on that, hog producers use natural fertilizer, so that's a way to do it. I yield back. Thank you.
Well, the gentleman yields his time, although it's expired. But there's all sorts of good fertilizer out there that we can use. I want to thank our two witnesses for your testimony here this morning. I think it really gave us an opportunity to focus on the challenges we're facing today and as we all noted, the current crisis that we're dealing with and to really get in front of it. And so we're going to continue to work with both of you and the Department of Agriculture and the Secretary because it's so important for all the reasons we are aware of. We are going to recess briefly for 5 minutes so that we can allow these two panel members to get back and do other important things, and we'll have our second panel start shortly thereafter. So we've got a little break here that we're going to recess for, and then we will begin with our second panel just in a few minutes, okay? So if you want to take a little break, and the chair will begin the committee shortly. Our next witness is Mr. Bill O'Keefe, and we are appreciative of his participation as well. I think both of you are old hands here at the appearing before Congress, and you understand that you have 5 minutes appropriately. And we appreciate very much your being here. As I said on the outset this morning, we have a crisis that we are dealing with as a result of world events. The situation in Ukraine, the horrific invasion of Ukraine by Russia, is having a ripple effect across the world. And the markets that are being impacted in terms of food availability is something that this subcommittee is very concerned on, and we're very interested in how we anticipate this storm that is coming and address it in every best way that we possibly can. So, Mr. O'Keefe, your previous background is with mobilization of Catholic Relief Services, and in your current role as Executive Vice President, we're looking forward to hearing your testimony as well. So I want to thank you folks for both being here, and let us begin with Mr. O'Keefe, and we will go from there. Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Thank you so much, Chairman Costa, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to testify today on the implementation of international food assistance programs authorized under Title III of the Farm Bill. CRS was founded in 1943 due to an outpouring of concern from Catholics across the United States to help refugees from World War II. I've served CRS starting in Africa for over 40% of that time, implementing, supervising, visiting, and supporting USDA and USAID food assistance programs. The arc of how Congress, USAID, and USDA have gradually shaped these programs bends towards sustainability, resilience, and flexibility. Marginal change, though, will no longer meet the challenges we as a country and the poor of the world face. After decades of progress, global hunger has steadily risen for 7 consecutive years. The 3 Cs, conflict, climate change, and COVID-19, are exacerbating chronic and severe food insecurity for people living in highly vulnerable and fragile contexts. This hearing has already brought out how Putin's war in Ukraine further threatens catastrophic global food insecurity. CRS Madagascar has already reported a 200 to 300% price hike in staple crops like wheat and vegetable oil, which dramatically cuts the number of vulnerable people our Title II supported program can reach. As others have already mentioned, we're going to need significant supplemental food assistance and other international disaster assistance to prevent famine, death, and suffering in numerous places. We at CRS are not the hyperbolic types, but we are extremely concerned. This Farm Bill, though, provides an opportunity to get in front of the storm that is coming. The non-emergency international food assistance programs are critical mechanisms for helping communities prepare for, adapt to, and even thrive in the world of the 3 Cs. We need to scale and maximize investments in multi-year development efforts aimed at sustainably reducing poverty and putting marginalized communities on a path towards resilience. People are multi-sectoral beings, and their families and communities have varied and complex multi-sectoral needs. Food for Peace Title II programs uniquely respond to those needs according to local contexts. In Haiti, Ethiopia, Kenya, Madagascar, Uganda, the DRC, and Niger, our Title II supported resilience, food security activities, support families to recover from crises and transition from subsistence farming into greater market engagement. These critical activities depend on a locally determined and flexible mix of cash and in-kind agricultural commodities, and the ability to design programs based on present on-the-ground needs. That is why CRS recommends that the next Farm Bill authorize full flexibility of funding for Title II non-emergency resources and the removal of the cap in 202E funding that Assistant Administrator Charles mentioned earlier. Implementing partners must be able to mix cash and commodities and multi-sector activities in direct response to local context, experience of local partners, and changing realities on the ground. In-kind commodities are critical in food deficit contexts, such as Madagascar and Ethiopia right now. Market-based analysis frequently point, though, to a balance of food sourced from the United States, food sourced locally, mobile money, vouchers, cash, alongside a mix of supporting activities. Furthermore, COVID-19 disruptions and adaptations, along with global food supply shortages and price inflation, exacerbated again by the war in Ukraine, are limiting the impact and sustainability of programs given the inflexibility of current Title II resources. Without a legislative fix that makes the non-emergency resources fully flexible, program design may undermine some of the best practices to fight hunger. Recently, in designing our RFSA in Haiti, these restrictions required too much commodity in the final year or two of the award, which limited our ability to transition to full self-reliance of the communities that we are serving. I urge Congress to consider building this greater flexibility for non-emergency programs in the upcoming Farm Bill and to adopt the other recommendations my written statement elucidates, including improving the Bill Emerson Humanitarian Trust and school feeding through the McGovern-Dole Food for Education program, and reauthorizing the other notable trade title programs such as agricultural value chain support provided through Food for Progress. Emergency and long-term development assistance, and eventually Feed the Future, play dynamic roles as layered and sequenced responses that are a lifeline for hungry people and build the foundation for more resilient and prosperous communities. We look forward to continuing our partnership with Congress, this committee, this subcommittee, USDA, and USAID to strengthen Farm Bill Title III international food assistance, and we thank you for the opportunity to share our work, and I welcome any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. O'Keefe, and your testimony is timely. Your suggestions on modifications with regards to Title III and implementation of various programs, given the current circumstances and the crisis that we are in, and I fear only to grow worse, are very important, and I'm sure I'll want another members revisit this during the time of questions. You know, in this time of, and you noted this pandemic, we have tried to learn to continue to work as efficiently as we can through Zoom and hybrid hearings, but we don't always get it right. I certainly don't always get it right. And I was focused on those that were physically here on the panel, but we have two other members that are on the panel that I failed to properly introduce, and I want to do that now. Our next witness on the second panel today is Ms. Kirsten Harder, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the U.S. Dairy Export Council. And then, of course, I noted earlier that we have Ms. Nicole Berg, who will be testifying on behalf of the National Association of Wheat Growers, and then our fourth witness will be of this panel, Dr. Arif Hussain, who is the Chief Economist of the World Food Program. Dr. Hussain is also joining us today from a long ways away. He's at the Democratic Republic of Congo, and we thank him for making the extraordinary effort to be testifying today before the second panel. So let us begin with Ms. Kirsten Harder, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the U.S. Dairy Export Council. Ms. Kirsten Harder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Johnson and other members of the committee for inviting me today. I'm not in the Congo, but I have to tell you, on my family farm in Southwest Georgia, Congressman Bishop's district, there are a lot of people in the world I would disappoint and leave early and come to be in person in this hearing, but my parents are just not one of them. So I had to be with them this week, and I really regret not being with all of you in person.
We'll give you a rain
Again,
check.
My name is Krista Harden. I'm testifying on behalf of the U.S. Dairy Export Council while I serve as President and CEO. Usdec represents the global trade interest of U.S. dairy farmers, processors, cooperatives, dairy ingredient suppliers, and export trading companies. And Usdec works closely with our partner, the National Milk Producers Federation, on trade-related issues. Since DEC was founded 27 years ago, dairy exports have grown tenfold, reaching a record $7.75 billion last year. All told, dairy exports accounted for about 17% of milk production. Our impressive export results made possible in part by U.S. programs and policies that support exports, many overseen by this committee. Today, I will discuss how existing Farm Bill programs, potential new Farm Bill provisions, and other trade policies can help drive the global demand and growth our dairy farmers and manufacturers need in order to create jobs in both rural and urban America. The Farm Bill promotes American-produced products through the Market Access Program and the Foreign Market Development Program, both of them instrumental to USDEC's efforts to support dairy exporters and build a market share against entrenched competitors. My written testimony includes a few specific examples in the many ways in which USDEC has used these programs in markets around the world. And an important part of MAP is its cross-sector global-based initiative program, and that's a mouthful, including one that USDEC leads that is devoted to preserving export access for U.S. foods and beverages using common names. This GBI has been extremely important to American agriculture's work to combat EU's abuse of geographic indications by imposing new trade barriers in various international markets. MAP and FMD offer excellent returns for every dollar invested in the export market development programs. Over $20 is returned in export revenue. Yet, while our exports have expanded tenfold, MAP and FMD resources have remained stagnant over the years. Given their critical missions and their impressive results, USDEC urges Congress to double MAP and FMD funding in the next Farm Bill. Another major component of the Farm Bill are U.S. food aid programs. We've talked a lot about those today, which play an important role in helping support the world's nutrition needs. However, U.S. dairy products are not typically a sizable piece of our food aid purchasing. This is despite of the robust scientific evidence on dairy's unique nutritional benefits. To make better use of these programs, Congress should seek opportunities in the Farm Bill to increase the use of U.S. dairy ingredients in food aid, including by scaling up purchases of ready-to-use therapeutic foods. We also asked this committee to consider two new provisions. First, we recommend language to combat the EU's abuse of geographic indications, legislation that can ensure USTRs and USDA more proactively can defend common use names using a variety of tools. We also recommend establishing specific timeframes for the administration to put forward critical nominees, specifically the USTR Agriculture Ambassador and the USDA Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Ag Affairs. While the Farm Bill's related provisions are vital to American exports, Congress should also consider to work to promote additional policies that are key in advancing market access for farmers and food manufacturers. I'll just speak on two. I know I'm running out of time, but our largest competitors have been exceptionally active in free trade agreements. The U.S. needs to get back in the game as well and craft an approach to pursuing comprehensive trade agreements that allow this country to advance its values and priorities on global trade. In the meantime, we need to fulfill the use of available tools like the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework and the Trade and Investment Framework Agreements. We also need to ensure our trading partners faithfully uphold current trade deals, and we've talked about that today. We greatly appreciate the administration securing a successful verdict in the USMCA's first ever dispute panel, yet more work remains. We discussed that today. We just need robust enforcement in this and in other markets, such as Mexico, as part of it has to be a key part of ensuring our exporters can can reap the full rewards of U.S. trade agreements. In closing, I'd like to emphasize again how important Title III of the Farm Bill is to the American dairy industry and its workers. USDEC looks forward to working with our industry colleagues to provide further input on these programs as work on the next Farm Bill advances. Thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to questions.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Harden, and with your previous experience, both working with USDA and other past years, we look forward to your thoughts in terms of the question period. Our next witness on today's panel is Ms. Nicole Berg, who is the president of the National Association of Wheat Growers, and in a conversation I had with her earlier, she has some familiarity with her family in the San Joaquin Valley, where I grew up and raised and have the honor to represent. And we welcome you here and your thoughts as it relates to the challenges we're facing, not only in Title III, but as we set the table for next year's Farm Bill reauthorization and the challenges we face and what insight you might be able to provide us. Ms. Berg.
Chairman Costa, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of Congress, thank you for the opportunity to testify before the Subcommittee on Livestock and Foreign Agriculture. My name is Nicole Berg. I'm a fourth-generation farmer where I work alongside my dad and two brothers on our family farm in Patterson, Washington. We grow dryland and irrigated wheat on a diversified farm. Currently, I serve as president of the National Association of Wheat Growers. NAWG is a federation of 20 state organizations and industry partners. We believe the Farm Bill Title III programs and how our federal partners administer them can be improved going into the next Farm Bill. NAWG intends to outline our priorities in the coming months as Congress begins debating reauthorization. Title III consists of two major elements that play a critical role in agricultural trade: international food aid and agricultural trade promotion. The international food aid programs have been successful in stabilizing economies and populations impacted by climate change, famine, and war. Trade promotion programs have helped U.S. agricultural products remain competitive on world markets and open access to new markets, which has boosted the agricultural economy and kept farmers in business. Nationwide, there are 6 different classes of wheat grown in different climates for different uses. In my home state of Washington, there are roughly 2,500 wheat farmers, and eastern part of the state is known as the home of the soft white wheat. This variety is grown primarily for their use for cookies, crackers, cakes, as well as flatbreads. Washington farmers also raise superb hard red winter and spring wheats for bread. So far, marketing this year, soft wheat makes up 34% of the food aid donations and has several success stories resulting in the Title III trade promotion programs. The programs in Title III play a significant role in the agricultural community. According to a study on MAP and FMD, these programs contribute an average of $8.2 billion more in ag export revenue per year. However, MAP and FMD funding levels have remained stagnant for 15 years. During that time, cooperators like U.S. Wheat have reduced staff and offices while they work to prioritize and maintain programming. NAWG has historically sought to preserve and enhance funding levels for export promotion programs, given their significant return on investment and support for American agriculture and rural communities. The study also concluded that by doubling annual MAP and FMD funding, cooperators would increase their investment by 50%, creating yearly increases in agricultural exports by $4.5 billion. As an example, this return on investment can be seen in the Philippines, where using Title III funds has increased our market share over 97% for U.S. wheat over the last 60 years. The Title III programs are essential to build trust with buyers and end users who also look to U.S. wheat for advice. While there's still uncertainty about how Russia's invasion of Ukraine will impact world markets, we know that the invasion will exacerbate global food insecurity. Title III food aid programs are the best suited for the U.S. wheat to help support the humanitarian needs of those involved. Markets that typically purchase wheat from Russia and Ukraine, including bread-heavy diets in Middle East and Africa, historically cannot afford high quality, high premium U.S. wheat. Using these programs will be the best way for the United States to help fill the unmet needs of a potential food crisis. I was fortunate enough to witness the effects of these life-changing programs firsthand when I joined members of U.S. Wheat Associates and other ag groups on a 2-week journey to Kenya and Tanzania in 2019. The trip was funded by export market development programs, toured the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, where the World Food Program is feeding more than 200,000 residents from 9 countries, with over half of their food supply coming from the United States. A man I met there named Nelson expressed they are always happy to see high quality of U.S. food they receive. We also visited the World Food Program's office in Mombasa, Kenya, where is one of the largest ports in Africa is located. Through this port, the World Food Program supports feeding programs in multiple African countries, all of which receive regular U.S. food shipments. This is just one example of life-changing impact these programs have made and certainly changed my life. As the committee continues to have these hearings and reflects on programs authorized under the 2018 Farm Bill, I look forward to working with members of the committee, their staff, and other witnesses here today to help craft a farm bill that enhances trade and help deliver American commodities to populations in need. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify before the committee today.
Well, we thank you, Ms. Berg, and for your testimony and your background and experience. That's Eastern Washington State that you farm in?
It is.
Terrific. Our last witness on this panel wins whatever prize we can award this individual for testifying for the longest distance. Dr. Arif Hussain is the chief economist of the World Food Program, and he's joining us today from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So, Dr. Hussain, I don't know what time of the day or night it is there, but we really very much appreciate your taking this opportunity to inform us on the challenges that we are facing with world hunger in the areas that we're very familiar with, and the new crisis that we've spoken about this morning with regards to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the additional impact it's having on food supplies. So your thoughts and comments will be very much appreciated this morning. What time is it there, Dr. Hussain?
Sir, good afternoon, sir. I'm just on my way. I was so concerned about the connection that I postponed my leaving till tonight.
Oh.
So I'm still in Rome.
Well, in Rome, that's still the longest distance, I think, for today's witnesses in terms of testifying. But what time is it in Rome?
Sir, it's just after 6 p.m.
Well, we thank you. Please begin your testimony. It's 5 minutes, so I think you're familiar with this process, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Costa, Ranking Member Johnson, and distinguished members of the House Agricultural Subcommittee, thank you. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to brief the subcommittee on the United Nations World Food Program's efforts to assist ever-increasing numbers of people with food assistance. Today, our world is not moving towards, but away from zero hunger. And the cost of humanitarian response is soaring while resources are more constrained. But first, I want to thank members of Congress from both sides of the aisle and both chambers for their continued support of the World Food Program. The United States is our largest partner, and we share an important history that dates back to the organization's very founding in 1961. The United States is our largest donor, and we deeply appreciate our partnership with the American farmer and agribusinesses. The quantity and quality of U.S. commodities is invaluable to our operations, and it is critical to our efforts to save lives, but also change lives around the world. Last year, the United States provided a record $3.86 billion to World Food Program, and a significant portion came through programs under the jurisdiction of this committee. As share of value, United States in-kind donations constituted 17% of WFP's total food procurement in 2021. We are very grateful for the commodity support we received through Title II emergency programs and the McGovern-Dole school feeding program. While WFP has increased its cash-based assistance portfolio in recent years, that does not mean that food transfers have become any less important. In fact, WFP benefits from having a balanced toolbox of food assistance modalities. We offer cash-based assistance where supplies are ample, markets are functioning, and inflation is under check. And we provide in-kind food assistance where markets are disrupted, food availability is limited, and inflation is a concern. Sir, the war in Ukraine has underlined the importance of in-kind assistance as well, which has a critical role in responding to domestic supply shocks that may soon be triggered in countries reliant on grain imports from the Black Sea region. Indeed, we cannot adequately speak to the current global hunger crisis and the importance of American food aid programs without addressing the conflict in Ukraine, which has global repercussions for food insecurity. It has caused deep upheaval in global food and energy markets. Steep rises in international prices for basic staples, fertilizers, and energy echo those last seen in the high food and fuel price crises of 2008 or 2011. But today's price hikes are perhaps even worse, because previously we did not also have to deal with COVID-19 or wars in Ethiopia, Yemen, Syria, and Northeast Nigeria. Sir, in 81 countries where WFP operates, up to 276 million people were already facing severe hunger crises or worse conditions. Now the Ukraine war would easily push another 47 million people worldwide into acute hunger. This means that up to 323 million people would become acutely food insecure just this year. They will need urgent food, nutrition, and livelihood assistance. Refugees, returnees, asylum seekers, and internally displaced persons are particularly vulnerable. WFP therefore plans to assist about 145 million people in 2022. This is an even higher number than in the past 2 years, when WFP assisted a record-breaking 115 million beneficiaries in 2020 and a record 128 million beneficiaries in 2021. This year, WFP's assistance will cost approximately $20 billion. Unfortunately, however, our funding requirements are growing much faster than our contributions, and today we face a funding gap of about 50%. While WFP has always faced funding gaps, they have previously not been this wide or in such a difficult environment. As other UN agencies, all being forced to cut our assistance at the same time. This makes cuts to WFP assistance, which offers a lifeline to millions of people, much more painful than they would have been in the previous years. The Ukraine crisis only adds to the funding gap by increasing commodity and transportation costs. Buying from further afield implies higher transport costs and delivery times. This means that WFP's monthly costs are expected to be $71 million above their 2019 average. This is a 44% increase and enough to cover one life-saving daily meal for 3.8 million people for a month. WFP is increasingly confronted with decisions of who to support and among those in need and who not to support. Which child lives, which child dies. The cost of humanitarian inaction are tremendous, especially for people on the edge of starvation, who in worst cases will pay with their lives. Failing to mobilize sufficient and timely funds for humanitarian assistance also means that donors bear the cost of inaction. As soon as refugees arrive at donor countries' doors, the new host governments start literally paying the price for not acting earlier. For every US dollar spent on forcibly displaced person in the developing world, US $70 goes to an asylum seeker in a donor country. WFP is extremely grateful for the sustained commitment of the American people to addressing global hunger and responding to urgent humanitarian crises around the world. We thank you for your continued support, partnership, and collaboration. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm ready for any questions. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hussain, for your time and also the comparative analysis that you've provided us with regards to the challenges the World Food Program has had in the past compared to the challenges today and the resources available. The members at this time will be recognized in the order of seniority, alternating between the majority and the minority members. We've heard our 4 witnesses who have done a terrific job, and every member will be recognized for 5 minutes to ask questions. For those of you who are operating remotely, please keep your microphones muted until you're recognized so that we can minimize background noise. Ms. Harden, you talked about the sustainability, which is very important to me. How does sustainability factor into USDEC's work to market and promote dairy products globally?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll tell you, I'm so proud of the dairy farmers and our dairy industry for their commitment to sustainability. I believe that we have the most sustainable dairy in the world. Our farmers and processors have set goals. This is a journey. We don't have all the answers today, but I do believe it's a big part of who we are and who we're going to be as a trading partner. And sir, we're asked all the time. Our customers ask us about sustainability, and they understand we're good for people, but we also have to be good for the planet,
right.
and we're committed to that.
And we have challenges, and I'm very familiar with a 3-generation dairy family in California. We have a kind of a bit of humor that we use oftentimes, and this relates to the famine and the shortage of food products that we're anticipating. That what do dairymen do when prices are up? They produce more milk. What do dairy folks do when prices are down? They produce more milk. I'm not sure that model works anymore, but I know there's a lot of production in powder, and I'm wondering, as I said earlier, you may have heard, commodities that we have surpluses of. I'm wondering what your thoughts might be on how this dry powder can be used, which is easily, it has a long life, and it can be used for protein in areas where we're having hunger and food shortages.
Oh, most definitely, sir. And I love your anecdote. That is one I've heard my whole career in dairy. I believe we can be a big part of helping with malnutrition and hunger. Dr. Hussain can verify this, but I was told that some of the biscuits that are going to Ukraine do include skill milk powder in them, and I believe there is more opportunity for the U.S. roughed products that have such high protein, high energy. I believe dairy can play a bigger part.
Well, let's take a look at that. Ms. O'Keefe and Ms. Berg, CRS is requesting full flexibility for non-emergency and Title II Food for Peace programming. This would mean that all of the non-emergency Title II funds could be used in cash vouchers instead of commodities. Can you walk us through CRS's rationale behind this recommendation? And would that flexibility in use of commodity food aid for non-emergency programming together make sense? I'm just, there were, not all the funds were spent on those commodities in the last year.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much.
Mr.
Great
O'Keefe.
question. We fully support the use of commodities in Title II programs where it's appropriate. And what we're recommending is that decisions about the mix of cash and commodities be made at the local level based on the very different contexts in each country. The way the program is now with a 20% cap on 202E, which was mentioned by Assistant Administrator Charles, USDA and USAID are forced to make decisions country by country based on these aggregate.
You think we should lift that cap?
I do think we should lift that cap, and I think it would allow better, more effective programs in many situations that are more responsive. Whether it would result in more or less total U.S. commodities would remain to be seen, but it would result in more efficient and effective programs country by country.
Ms. Berg?
I know that they did have some flexibility in the last Farm Bill. Having been to Africa and witnessed a refugee camp, we definitely support in-kind commodities. We promote it. It was great to see that big bag of U.S. wheat sitting there and everybody embracing the fact that we're there. We do want a balance between the two. We did see the need for cash and how they create their camps and how they create this self-worth for the refugees as well. And it helps out with the hospitals and different things.
One, we've got a lot of refugees from Ukraine, over 4 million now that are in Europe. Dr. Hussein, you care to comment?
Sir, I agree with both. I mean, essentially, it is about having the in-kind assistance, in-kind commodities. There is space for that, but also you would need the cash base on the additional cash, because what it does is it helps for people to keep the food, because sometimes people will have to sell their food on discount to get to other basic necessities, maybe health stuff, maybe school stuff, maybe something else. So as long as these decisions are made where food aid also goes together with cash assistance and it is well thought out, it is in benefit of everybody, including the American farmer.
Yeah, I don't know if my time has expired, but quickly comment. The previous panel talked about our efforts to cooperate with the European Union and the initiatives that are going on as a result of this invasion of Ukraine and the impacts. Was the World Food Program also with the UN and others a part of this collaborative effort?
Yes, sir. They're listening to us. We are in an advisory role, basically, and what we are saying is that it may be a production problem, but it is also economic access and physical access problem. Right now, there may be food in different parts of the world, but to get that food to the places where it is needed is really expensive, both in terms of cost, but also in terms of time.
Good point. My time's expired. I want to recognize my friend, the gentleman from South Dakota, who's always focused, Representative Dusty Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now that's a lot of pressure. My line of questioning has to be focused, or I make us both look silly. My questions will be for Ms. Hardin. I noted with some disappointment that last week Ambassador Tai had noted that the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework was not going to have any reduction in tariffs. And, this is coming at a backdrop where I think American producers are increasingly facing some uneven playing fields. Of course, competitiveness is really a relative measure, right? So to the extent other countries are entering into quality trade deals, that can disadvantage American producers if we're not also out there trying to make sure that we're opening up new markets and reducing barriers. So, Ms. Hardin, I think a two-part question for you. Number one, give us some sense of the barriers that American dairy producers and processors face in the Indo-Pacific region, number one. And then number two, give us sort of the state of play as you understand it. I mean, do you think that Ambassador Tai and others will aggressively pursue the reduction and elimination of non-tariff trade barriers? And any other thoughts on that topic?
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your support and continue to make sure that agriculture is a focus of the framework. There's certain things that I hope are on top of their list, and one is streamlining a really overly burdensome regulatory requirements on our dairy facilities and plants, trying to get product in there. We believe that is something that can be addressed and should be addressed. I talked about it in my comments briefly about really protecting our common food names. So, the Europeans have really made it very hard for us to have an even playing field with products like Parmesan and feta. So that's another area we really hope the administration will focus on. And we really do. We're going to continue to keep pressure on to lower those most favored nation tariffs to really ensure we have a level playing field, because we do not in so many of those cases, sir.
So in the Indo-Pacific region, are there particular markets that your members are most excited about, interested in, and that this committee should focus on most attentively?
Certainly. Indonesia, as I mentioned, Malaysia, the Philippines, Vietnam, all of those we believe have great potential. The customers there, the consumers there love our products. They want our products. We want to be able to get them to them.
So do you have, what's your sense of where are we making progress on this front? And where do you, what do you see the developments looking like here in the weeks and months to come?
Well, progress, we certainly are continuing. If you look globally, I'd say we do have progress. We continue to be very aggressive in key markets, certainly in the Indonesia Pacific, in Southeast Asia, Mexico, Latin America, the Middle East, Northern Africa. But we're at a disadvantage in many of those places. So keeping the pressure on to make sure there is a level playing field. We have great products. There is demand. It's a tight market right now, as you probably know, with product because of production from the EU and New Zealand, as well as the U.S. being very tight. But we're excited about exports. If you look at even our numbers that just came out this week, U.S. dairy farmers and manufacturers are stepping up and trying to meet the demand globally.
Yeah, my friend, the chairman, he and I have been working together on a number of supply chain issues. And so my last question, Ms. Harden, any reactions or things you can share with us? I know the dairy industry has been hit hard by the supply chain disruptions. In fact, I think the number for the first half of last year was $1.3 billion. What else can you tell us?
It's a little better right after Christmas, and some of the efforts led by you, frankly, and other members of this committee have been tremendously helpful. The legislation that's passed, the introduction of additional legislation by you and Chairman Costa are sending a message to customers around the world. The U.S. has taken this issue very, very seriously, but we're not out of the woods. It is still very.
We lost you for a minute there, Ms. Harden, but, amen. We are not out of the woods.
We've suggested other locations as well.
Very good. Thanks, Ms. Harden. That's well said. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you.
Good points, Ms. Johnson, and we'll continue to work on the supply chain issue. It's so important. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. G.T. Johnson, for his continued attention to this important hearing today. We thank you.
Chairman, Ranking Member, thank you so much. This has been great, and thank you to the panel. Really appreciate the experience that you all bring. Ms. Berg, your testimony mentions concerns with staffing in overseas FAS offices. We can do all kinds of great programs if we don't have the people on the ground, different places, whether it's in the fields here at home or overseas, it's all for naught. Can you expand upon this concern, including what you've seen and heard, and your suggestions to USDA FAS to rectify these shortages?
One of the things we're looking for is to double map an FMD funding to help with resources overseas. One of the things that we've noticed with MAP and FMD funding is that it used to, 15 years ago, you had certain cooperators, and now through specialty crops, it's just kind of growing and growing. And so pieces of the pie are kind of getting smaller and smaller to each commodity. So that's why we definitely need more funding for these programs to get boots on the ground and have a presence in these countries. So we definitely want to have some sort of funding mechanism to help with staffing levels.
So we've actually been a victim of our own accomplishments of expanding innovation and science and I think that's a great point. Dr. Hussain, thank you for your service. Please give my best to Mr. Beasley when you see him, dear friend. And I appreciate your recognition of the role of American farmers in making your work of feeding those in need around the world possible. Likewise, you acknowledge the importance of a, quote, balanced toolbox of food assistance modalities. Now, can you elaborate on what you mean by that? And do you worry that it's kind of short-sighted of your colleagues to continue to chip away at the in-kind donations required under Food for Peace?
Sir, what I mean by that is that if you go back about 10 years, the cash-based programs were a very, very small part of World Food Program, which was about $210 million. Today, that is $2.3 billion. So there has been a substantial growth on that side. But that growth has not meant that the food aid, in-kind food aid went down. In-kind food aid also went up from about 3.6 million tons to about 4.4 million tons right now over the same time period. So what we are seeing is that there is because of these rising needs, it's the base of what is required is becoming bigger and bigger. And the way I see this is that because we are sitting at a 50% gap in terms of what we expect to get versus what is needed, there is opportunity for growth both on the in-kind side as well as on the cash side. Because again, I would say is that what we don't want to do is have people sell their food because they needed to meet some other essential need. So provision of both of them hand in hand goes very far. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe, thank you for your service with Catholic Relief Services. We're a force for good around the world. Your testimony alludes to the idea of resiliency and resilience building. Can you tell us how these efforts are unfolding in CRS's work and how each of the CRS Farm Bill recommendations build resiliency?
Sure. So thank you so much, Congressman, and thanks for the kind compliment. So I'm going to talk about our program, McGovern-Dole program in Sierra Leone. The president of Sierra Leone, who I had the opportunity to meet a year and a half ago at the Department of Agriculture here, thanked CRS because he is trying to build a nationwide local school feeding program on the foundation and the spine of the USDA-supported McGovern-Dole program. And that is a key ingredient to how he sees resilience of government services and particularly food support for the most vulnerable people in his country. We're using U.S. commodities mixed with cash to build the capacity to link schools with farmers to buy local produce so that at the end of the 5-year program, the country of Sierra Leone will be self-sufficient in its school feeding program. That is going to make that country more resilient, make those schools more resilient, and we think is a huge contribution to the development of that society.
Right. My time's expired, but I don't want to miss the opportunity just to say thank you, Ms. Harden, for your leadership, your service with USDA formerly, and now with the Dairy Export Council as someone who's comes from a long line of dairy farmers. Some days I think there's milk flowing through my veins. Just really appreciative of your leadership and your service there. So I look forward to continuing to work with you. Chairman, my time has expired.
Well, thank you very much, Representative Johnson. We really appreciate all of your contributions. And we all thank the witnesses and the efforts on mission for mobilization on Catholic Relief Services. We appreciate the good work you folks do as well. Our next member is Representative Barrymore from Alabama, and then I believe we have one other member who is in queue, and if that's the extent of it, then we will close the hearing. Mr. Moore from Alabama's 2nd District.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Mr. Hussein, each day reveals more dire news from the Ukraine. Your testimony spends some time addressing the conflict and its current and potential implications. Can you please expound on that testimony a little and also include any updates that you might have from yesterday or maybe this morning?
Yes, sir. In Ukraine, sir, it is one of the worst crises which I have seen, and I have seen many. What is happening there is unacceptable, and we are right in the middle of that. As World Food Program, we are assisting about 1 million people already inside the country. Our goal is to get to at least 3 million people very, very soon, within weeks, and up to 6 million people by June. Sir, we are, in our supply chains, we already have 40,000 metric tons of commodities, which we are trying to move. It is not only about, when you're displaced and over 10 million people are internally displaced, it's not about giving wheat or flour, it is about giving commodities which they can eat right away. So prepared commodities and doing that supply chain is a big task, but we are up to it. We have got over 176 people inside and in the 6 neighboring countries doing this job. And I would like to say that, sir, what is happening in Ukraine has huge ramifications for the rest of the world, where in country after country, 44 million people, one step away from famine. 44 million people, one step away from famine. We are cutting their rations by half. Why? Because we don't have enough resources. And sir, this is not going to go away till we sort out the root causes. And what is the biggest root cause? It is conflict. Conflict everywhere. In Ukraine, that's the latest, but Yemen is still there. Syria is still there. Northeast Nigeria is still there. Ethiopia is still there. And so the other last thing I want to say is that because of Ukraine, it doesn't mean that other conflicts stopped. We have climate shocks. I'm seeing things out of Ethiopia in the Somali region, which remind me of 2011 Somalia, where 260,000 people died before a famine was declared, according to Johns Hopkins University. So we are looking at some very nasty things, and I don't think it's going to improve, because if this war doesn't get resolved within the next couple of months, fall is going to be worse than what we are seeing right now. I'm sorry to be so saying all of these things, but that's what's out there.
We appreciate that, obviously, and I was in Ukraine in August, and I know that us as a committee and as a nation, we appreciate your efforts, and we'll continue to keep you in our prayers, but thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
Gentleman still has time on the clock unless you yield the balance of your time.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll yield back. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And that was a good question, good focus, good response, Dr. Hussein. The next member that I have, I think, on my queue line is Representative Baer from Indiana's 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate you holding the second part of this panel in this hearing. My first question really goes to Ms. Harden, and it deals with the fact that Ambassador Tai recently stated that free trade agreements are a 20th century tool, and our competitors, notably the European Union, are forging ahead in securing preferential market access for their agricultural producers through comprehensive trade agreements. So, Ms. Harden, are you concerned about where we are in making those kinds of trade agreements and how that impacts American-produced products?
Yes, sir. To be perfectly honest, I believe we have to use every tool available. We do feel like we're falling behind our largest competitors, as I mentioned earlier, with the EU and New Zealand. They take full advantage of all of the tools, and I believe we just have to as well. We know we have good products. We know we can be competitive, but it has to be a level playing field. So everything that can be available, we actually need to be using, sir.
You know, I really agree with you. One of the things that we have in our favor, in addition to being able to really get products to other countries, is we really have high quality products. We have an ability to produce, and our farmers and ranchers can really be proud of that, and we can be proud of our products moving overseas. I guess I might change direction just a little bit. And Mr. Hussein, the World Food Program, I think, is a critical partner for the U.S. in getting food into the disaster zones and delivering longer term assistance through USDA's McGovern-Dole Food for Education program. Can you tell us a little bit about your success in using these nutritionally dense U.S. Grown food in your McGovern-Dole projects, like fortified rice, corn spry bran, and dry beans? Give us some idea how successful those programs are.
Sir, we are, in fact, McGovern-Dole, we are proud partners of that, of the 40 or so countries where it is helping school children. We are in 10 countries. So about a quarter of countries we are working with McGovern-Dole. And that itself says, we do that because we believe in it. We see, like Mr. O'Keefe was saying, we see the value of the child providing that nourished meal, not only as something which is for the child, but it is for the community. And that bringing in the community support on that side, starting giving this, putting essentially the seeds for that is critical, because then communities can take over, they can build. And I think this is the real value of McGovern-Dole initiative. And the more we can do, the better it is. And the other thing, sir, I would suggest is that we are present in 80 countries. We know these people, we know these markets, and sometimes we can offer advice on which countries to prioritize, where to prioritize. And I think that would also be quite helpful in terms of taking these really trusted and proven programs to another level. Thank you, sir.
Well, I'm glad to hear, because I think one way that we can advance civilizations to help themselves is through the children and give them the exposure to how to produce food and that sort of thing. And I think that's a real asset.
That's key, sir.
Yeah. Well, I thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you. And I yield back, Mr. Chair.
The gentleman yields back, and we thank him for his focus and his participation. And I will now, for closing comments, recognize my colleague, the gentleman from South Dakota, and then I will follow. And again, we want to thank our witnesses.
There have been a number of references made today, Mr. Chairman, to McGovern-Dole initiatives. And in fact, our colleague from the Big First of Kansas noted that Bob Dole had held that seat prior to Tracy Mann. I would just note that George McGovern held my seat in Congress. He was not my immediate predecessor. But in the final years of his life, he and I struck up quite a relationship. I think we got to know each other relatively well. And clearly, George McGovern's politics were not my politics. But there were a number of areas upon which we agreed. And three of them were, first off, a recognition of the unbelievable efficiency and effectiveness of the American farmer and rancher. Number two, the incredible importance of access to markets, giving those producers an opportunity to help feed the world. And then number three, the incredible power of food, of sustenance, to help link together people of shared values that you spoke about earlier, Mr. Chairman, and about how that humanitarian aid can be a tremendous soft power that makes the world more secure, safer, and freer. And it's not just George McGovern and I that share those values, Mr. Chairman. There are values that you and I share as well, and shared values of a huge swath of bipartisan members on this committee. So I just want to close by thanking the panelists on both halves of the panel for so clearly articulating the key issues that are impacting those shared values, and what we can do together in the weeks and months to come to make sure that American producers have avenues for their yields, that communities in crisis receive the help they need, and that shared values are advanced.
I thank the gentleman for his comments, and I concur on all of the above. And I think this has been a very good hearing. It's been a very good hearing not only because of the participation of the members this morning, but also because of the witnesses. We've had a tremendous level of experience and expertise from this second panel as well as from the first panel. And it certainly resonates on the complex issues that we're dealing with. And of course, we've discussed this morning how the catastrophic events that have taken place as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine without reason, and the effects it's having not only for the courageous, valiant people in Ukraine, but the ripple effect it's having elsewhere, and the added refugee problems that we're dealing with. Obviously, we're going to continue to find ways to support Ukraine and find ways to, as Dr. Hussein pointed out and others, prop up the global food supply chain. I think while we've not discussed it too much this morning, tapping into the Bill Emerson Humanitarian Trust is one step that could have an immediate impact. But we talked about lifting caps. We talked about a host of other ideas and thoughts dealing with commodities in which we have surpluses here in the United States. And I'm heightened to hear how, as we look at next year's effort for the reauthorization of the Farm Bill, the suggestions that our witnesses have made on how we can improve Title III and Title II and how we can improve the way these programs work. I'm reminded of the fact that the iteration of our flagship international food aid programs was Food for Peace, conceived by another significant American statesman, Hubert Humphrey. Senator Humphrey signed that law in by President Dwight Eisenhower. That takes us back a ways. But its inception is an indication of, and I want to close on this note, on what we can do in this incredible country of ours when we work together on a bipartisan basis. Over the years, our success, I believe, has best been demonstrated when we work together on a bipartisan basis. And certainly, as a colleague of ours once said, I believe he's ambassador to Japan right now, never let a crisis go to waste. As horrific as this crisis is, it gives us an opportunity to restore the notion that we put our politics, we leave it behind at the water's edge. And these global challenges we're facing, not only in Ukraine, but as Dr. Hussein mentioned, in Yemen and elsewhere around the world, conflict is the source of this. And therefore, we as America are stronger and better and more able to work with our allies if we together here in Washington are united and we put our politics aside. And that's part of our challenge. But we have an opportunity here. We know that the storm is in front of us. And we can anticipate, because of that, what we need to do to address the challenges that we're facing. As I said earlier this morning, historians will look back 20 years, 25 years from now, and they'll make determinations on whether or not we made more good decisions than poor decisions. I believe we have an opportunity to work together to make good decisions as it relates to the programs not only in Title III, but the other titles within the farm authorization. And we can find ways to use emergency initiatives to address the current crisis that we're facing. So with that said, I want to thank the members of the committee. I want to thank our witnesses for the good work that you've done. And we'll keep all of these thoughts in mind, not only today, tomorrow, but as we write the next Farm Bill next year. So with that, under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplementary written responses from any witness or any question posed by a member. So with that understood, thank the witnesses for the terrific job you've done. And this hearing of the subcommittee on livestock and foreign agriculture is now adjourned.